Forget boy bands, these guys were the original heartthrobs of wrestling. We're talking the Rock and Roll Express. Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson looked like they stepped right off MTV, wrestled like lightning, and were so popular they needed police escorts. Not many tag teams in wrestling have become as famous or lasted as long as the Rock and Roll Express. They were made up of two wrestlers, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson, and they were one of the most exciting and popular teams from the 1980s onward. They had fast moves, fun energy, and a strong connection with the crowd, especially younger fans. Their style, look, and teamwork helped them stand out, and they kept going for decades. Their journey had ups and downs, but through it all, they left a big mark on wrestling. Let's start with Ricky Morton. He was basically born into the wrestling world. His dad, Paul Morton, was a well-known referee, and Ricky grew up going to matches and learning the business. He started wrestling when he was just 20 years old, around 1977. At first, he worked in the southern wrestling areas, like Memphis, teaming up with guys like Ken Lucas and Eddie Gilbert. Even in those early days, Ricky had something special. He was fast, exciting to watch, and he had this cool rock star look with his blonde mullet. Fans, especially teenage girls, loved him. He was known for taking a lot of punishment in matches, but always finding a way to fight back. People really got behind him when he was down and cheered like crazy when he made a comeback. Over time, Ricky became more well-known and even won some tag team championships early in his career. But the big moment for him came when someone had the idea to team him up with another wrestler who had a similar vibe. That's where Robert Gibson comes in. Robert was also from the South and also grew up around wrestling. His older brother, Ricky Gibson, was a pro wrestler and helped train him. Robert started wrestling in 1977, just like Ricky Morton. At first, he mostly worked with his brother and wrestled in different southern territories. His style was a bit like Ricky's, fast, athletic, and fun to watch. But Robert was known to be a bit stronger. He wasn't a big guy, but in the team, he was usually the one who came in fresh and cleaned house after his partner had taken the beating. By the early 1980s, both Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson were doing well on their own, but they hadn't become stars yet. That changed in 1983. The wrestling promoters in Memphis, Jerry Jarrett and Jerry Lawler, had an idea. They wanted to create a tag team that would appeal to young fans, especially girls, and tie into the pop culture of the time. Music videos were becoming huge thanks to MTV, and glam rock bands were all over the place. The promoters thought, why not create a tag team that looks and acts like rock stars? So they put Morton and Gibson together, and the Rock and Roll Express was born. Right from the start, these two had something great going. They dressed in bright colors, wore bandanas and fringe jackets, and came to the ring looking like they belonged in a music video. They were fun, fast, and full of energy. Fans loved it. When they came out, it felt more like a rock concert than a wrestling match. Teenage girls screamed for them, and wrestling crowds everywhere started getting louder when they showed up. In Memphis, they quickly got into big matches with teams like the Galaxians, the Bruise Brothers, and even Lanny Poffo and a young Randy Savage. But things really took off when they moved to another wrestling area. Mid-South Wrestling, run by Bill Watts. There, the Rock and Roll Express became even more popular. They won the Mid-South Tag Team Championship 3 times in 1984 and became the top fan favorites in the area. One of the biggest parts of their story was their rivalry with another team, the Midnight Express. That team was made up of Dennis Condrey and Bobby Eaton, and they had a loud, annoying manager named Jim Cornette. The Midnight Express were the bad guys, and the Rock and Roll Express were the good guys. It was a perfect setup. Fans loved watching Morton and Gibson stand up to the bullies. One moment fans still talk about is when Ricky and Robert shoved a cake in Cornette's face during a celebration. People went wild for that. The matches between these two teams were exciting, and the fans were always into it. Ricky Morton would usually be the one who got beat up for most of the match. He was so good at making it look real and making people feel bad for him. Then right when things looked hopeless, he'd finally tag in Robert Gibson, who'd come in fresh and take out the other team. This kind of tag team style wasn't new, but Morton and Gibson did it better than most. In fact, people still use the term playing Ricky Morton in wrestling when someone gets beat up for a long time before making the big comeback. In 1985, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson made a big move. They joined Jim Crockett Promotions, which was part of the National Wrestling Alliance (NWA). This wrestling company was based in the southeastern U.S., mainly in the Carolinas and Georgia. At the time, it was growing fast because it was on national TV through a channel called TBS. That meant more fans across the country could now see them in action. This move changed everything for the Rock and Roll Express. Before this, they were popular in Southern wrestling territories. But once they were on national TV, their popularity exploded. They became real superstars. Right away, they made a huge splash. On July 9, 1985, Ricky and Robert made their debut on JCP's TV show. That same night, they beat Ivan Koloff and Crusher Khrushchev and won the NWA World Tag Team titles. That almost never happened. New wrestlers don't usually win a championship on their first night, but the fans loved them, and it worked. This win made them look like big-time stars right from the start. After that, they got into a heated feud with the Russians, Ivan Koloff, and his nephew Nikita. This was during the Cold War, so Russian villains were a big deal in wrestling. The Rock and Roll Express were the young, all-American heroes, and fans saw them as the good guys standing up to the bad guys. They fought many matches with the Koloffs and traded the tag team belts back and forth throughout 1985. One of the most exciting moments was at Starrcade 1985, a big wrestling event. Ricky and Robert beat the Russians and won back the titles. The crowd went crazy. That match really helped prove how popular and exciting the Rock and Roll Express had become. For the next couple of years, 1986 and 1987, they stayed right at the top of the tag team world. They won the NWA World Tag Team titles 4 times during this time and were a huge part of Jim Crockett Promotions' success. Their biggest rivalry continued to be with the Midnight Express, who also joined JCP. The Midnight Express, managed by loudmouth Jim Cornette, were the perfect enemies for the Rock and Roll Express. Fans loved watching these two teams fight. Their matches were wild, full of drama, and always exciting. In 1987, their rivalry led to a dangerous type of match called a scaffold match at Starrcade. In this kind of match, the two teams climb onto a narrow platform 20 feet above the ring and fight up there. One team wins by knocking the other off. It was scary just to watch, and even scarier to perform. Ricky and Robert won by sending the Midnight Express falling from the scaffold, and fans couldn't stop talking about it. The Rock and Roll Express also had big matches against other top teams. In 1986, they beat Ole and Arn Anderson, part of the famous Four Horsemen group, in a steel cage match to keep their titles. That win showed they could go toe-to-toe with the toughest wrestlers around. And it wasn't just tag team action that made them stars. Ricky Morton got pulled into a singles feud with Ric Flair, who was the NWA World Champion and one of the biggest names in wrestling. Flair didn't like how much attention Ricky was getting from young female fans. He felt like Ricky was stealing his spotlight, especially with the ladies. Flair started mocking Morton on TV. In one moment, he gave Ricky a training bra as a gift, trying to embarrass him. Ricky smashed Flair's expensive sunglasses in response, and that kicked off a big feud. Later, Flair and the Four Horsemen beat up Ricky and even scraped his face on the concrete floor, trying to ruin his pretty boy image. Ricky didn't back down. He kept fighting and even challenged Flair for the world title a few times. One of the biggest matches was in a steel cage during the Great American Bash in 1986. Morton didn't win, but he came close, and he showed everyone that he could hang with the best, even as a singles wrestler. All of this made Ricky and Robert even more popular. Their fame during this time was huge. In some cities, fans would line up for hours just to see them. Teenage girls especially went wild for them. They were like rock stars. Their theme music, Rock and Roll is King by ELO, fit perfectly. At one point, they caused such a big scene at an amusement park in North Carolina that the park asked them to leave because the crowd around them got out of control. Things got so intense that police had to be stationed outside their homes in Charlotte just to keep overexcited fans from showing up at their doors. It wasn't just kids and teens either. Everyone loved the Rock and Roll Express. Even though they were often put on what was called the B Tour, the smaller shows, those shows ended up selling more tickets than the A Tour events that featured bigger names like Ric Flair or Dusty Rhodes. That caused some tension behind the scenes. Dusty Rhodes, who was also the booker, the person who plans the matches, once scolded them because their show in one city did better than his in another. That showed just how powerful their fan base really was. But with all that fame came pressure. The Rock and Roll Express had one of the toughest work schedules in wrestling. In 1986, they reportedly went 9 straight months without a single day off. They wrestled almost every night and were always traveling. It wore them down physically and mentally. When they asked for a break, promoter Jim Crockett Jr. said no. He told them it would cost too much money to give them time off. So Ricky and Robert had to get creative. They started faking small injuries just to get a few days of rest. It was the only way they could slow down. By the end of 1987, things started to change. The Rock and Roll Express lost the tag titles for the last time in that era. They were defeated by Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard of the Four Horsemen, but only after the Midnight Express attacked them before the match. That loss was the beginning of the end for their run in Jim Crockett Promotions. Behind the scenes, things weren't great either. Ricky and Robert were growing tired of the intense schedule and started having disagreements with Dusty Rhodes and the other bosses. In early 1988, things blew up. The Rock and Roll Express were fired from the company. Fans were shocked. How could the most popular tag team just be let go? One reason, according to Ricky, was that Dusty wanted him to cut his hair for a new storyline. Ricky refused. That may have been the final straw. They were burned out and ready to move on anyway. Their last match before being written off was a quick loss to Ivan Koloff in the Warlord. It lasted just 12 seconds. That was the company's way of pushing them out of the spotlight. After leaving, they wrestled in other promotions like the AWA and went back to Memphis for a bit. They even had matches against a young tag team called the Midnight Rockers, Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, who were clearly inspired by the Rock and Roll Express. The matches were fun, but their time in AWA didn't last long. They also went to Japan and wrestled in some smaller promotions. In mid-1988, the company formerly known as Jim Crockett Promotions was now becoming WCW. They brought back Ricky and Robert for a short time, but it didn't last. Robert left after a pay dispute, and Ricky followed not long after. Their run with Crockett was truly over. Outside the ring, life wasn't always easy. Fame came with problems. Ricky talked about fans showing up at his house, bothering his family and spreading rumors. It caused stress in his personal life. Both he and Robert were still young, but dealing with the kind of attention most people never experience. By the end of the 1980s, things had started to change for the Rock and Roll Express. After years of being one of the top tag teams in wrestling, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson were no longer in the spotlight. They had finished their time in the NWA, and in 1989, they were back to wrestling in smaller places. They did some shows in Memphis and worked for a few independent companies here and there. They were still popular, but they weren't on the big stage anymore. That changed in 1990. WCW had taken over from where Jim Crockett Promotions left off. It was now one of the top wrestling companies in the country. WCW brought back Ricky and Robert, and fans were happy to see them again. They showed up on TV, teamed with other good guys, and even started wrestling the Midnight Express again. It felt like old times, but wrestling had moved on. WCW was focusing more on younger stars, bigger wrestlers, and flashier tag teams. The Rock and Roll Express still had loyal fans, but they weren't the hot new act anymore. They still got a shot at the titles, though. At the Great American Bash in 1990, they had a big match against Doom, the tag champs at the time. Doom was made up of Ron Simmons and Butch Reed, two strong, serious wrestlers. Ricky and Robert gave it their best shot, but they lost that night. Then, something unlucky happened. In September 1990, Robert hurt his knee badly. The official story was that it happened in the ring during a match, but later on, Ricky said it really happened the day before. According to him, Robert's wife accidentally hit him with a car. Either way, Robert needed surgery and would be out for months. With Robert gone, Ricky had to wrestle on his own. Fans were used to seeing them together, so this felt strange. Still, Ricky kept going. Then came the biggest surprise of all. In June 1991, Robert finally came back from his injury. Everyone thought the Rock and Roll Express was back together. But during a live TV show called Clash of the Champions, Ricky suddenly turned on Robert. Just like that, he attacked his partner in front of everyone. Fans were shocked. Ricky joined a new group called the York Foundation. It was supposed to be high-tech and modern. He changed his name to Richard Morton and started acting like a bad guy. It was a big change from the wild rock star image he had before. Ricky and Robert ended up wrestling against each other. They had a match at the Great American Bash in 1991. Ricky won with help from his new manager. But fans didn't really buy the change. Ricky had been such a big fan favorite for so long that people didn't want to boo him. It just didn't feel right. By the end of 1991, the whole thing had kind of fizzled out. Robert got released from WCW, and Ricky quietly left not long after. On their own, neither one reached the same level of success they had as a team. The spark just wasn't there without the other.